Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. In this video, our review in chapter 13 is about the cultural analysis of postmodernism and postmodernity. Postmodernism has several dimensions. First, on aesthetic and artistic styles that reject the aesthetic and artistic code of modernism. It also includes philosophical and theoretical positions that arise from post-structuralism and reject the principle of modernist thought. Postmodernity is a stage of social development which is considered to have transcended modernity, synonym for the postmodern era. The main idea is that there has been a decisive and radical shift to a post-industrial economy organized around cultural and consumption of cultural media and information technology. Postmodernization Postmodernization refers to the process of social change that encouraged the transition from modernity to postmodernity. Globalization is a process by which the world becomes more and more connected when political, cultural, and economic boundaries are removed. Most of the discussion on postmodernity involve some discussion of globalization. The field where postmodern concept first took hold is the field of architecture. Since debates about architecture have long occupied a central place in discussion of postmodernism among cultural theorists as well as architects and planners, an understanding of such a problem is required. This is also a useful place to start thinking about the difference between aesthetic modernism and postmodernism. Architecture critical Charles Jacques said that at the end of modern architecture until July 15, 1972, at 3 p.m. At the time, several blocks of the Pretzel Ego housing scheme in St. Louis, Missouri were blown up. It was a uniform concrete blockhouse, had been repeatedly vandalized, and was notoriously prone to crime. Repeat attempts to improve development have failed. Jenks point out that scheme Flores is symbolic of a broader problem with modernism in architecture. The Pratt Ego scheme has been designed according to the principles of rationalism, behaviors, and pragmatism, but doesn't provide a safe or pleasant place to live. Jacques argues that modern architecture has several case characteristics. 1. Form tends to be univalent. 2. The buildings are illustrated according to industrial factory metaphors. 3. Designers have utopian ideas influenced by artistic, political, and philosophical doctrine. They believe that architecture could play a heroic role as part of a broader social and more engineering project. According to James, the failure of modernist architecture is symbolized by the death of pre-ego development. Most people find modern architectural metaphors somewhat alienating. Similar development took place in the field of art and literature where postmodernists challenged what they saw as a disease of modernism. Modernism as aesthetic could prefer work that are very serious, internally conscious, innovative, abstruse, abstract, and written by a genius. Figures associated with modernism in whose work embodies these characteristics include 1. Composers such as Schoenberg, Stravinsky, and Webern. 2. Artists like Picasso, Matisse, Clay, Mondrian, and Pollack. Three authors such as Joyce, Beckett, Pound, and Eliot. Postmodern work in this area is driven to a large extent by aesthetic differences. It tends to be playful and fragmented, using aesthetic and borrowed to celebrate things that are irrational, and sometimes easily accessible to interpretation without expert knowledge. Often there are no clear messages or moral in working. Such creative products are often ironic in tone, ridicule, and challenge established aesthetic participant and concept. Postmodern work also often challenges the boundary between high and low culture. Intellectual debates about postmodernism are often rejected in the writings of the French social philosopher Jean-Francois Lyotard. According to Lyotard, society is organized not only around technology but also around games and language discourse. He draws special attention to the role of narrative social life in non-industrial societies. Myth and story have a religious quality and aid in the reproduction of social order. With the advent of the Enlightenment, a new set of narrative emerged at the same time as the rise of science. It emphasized in importance of progress, reason, knowledge, and technology in bringing freedom from ignorance. Lyotard said that we have now entered a new postmodern era. Science, technology, complex administrative system, and computer have evolved to a stage where knowledge has been a major force of production for the past several decades. This shift has both qualitative and quantitative dimension. Later work wrote that social bonds are linguistic but not interwoven with a single thread. No one speaks all those languages. They have a universal meta-language. The goal of emancipation has nothing to do with science. We are all caught up in the positivism of this or that discipline of learning. The educated have turned into scientists. The dimension research tasks have become fragmented and no one can master them all. It's also important to note that he placed great emphasis on the shift to postmodern, a post-industry society rather than a move from traditional to industrial modernity that attracted early scholars. Like Lyotard, Jean Baudrillard was a major early influence on the development of postmodern theory. Baudrillard argues that we live in an era where society is no longer based on the exchange of material goods for use values. Rather, he suggests it involved commodities as sign and symbol, which had a complete arbitrary and conceptual meaning in what he called codes. His notion of code for refers to the notion of Levi-Strauss culture as a collective grammar of markets. For Baudrillard, a consumer society is one in which people strive to assert their identity and differences and experience pleasure through the purchase and consumption of a shared system. He wrote, consumption is an order of meaning, like language or like the kinship system in primitive society. Circulation, buying, selling, seizure of goods, and distinguishing of our object is our language. Baudrillard goes on to suggest that code has become dimension in such a way that we must question some of the most fundamental differences that have informed social and cultural thought. According to him, the distinction between culture and reality, and between things and what is symbolized, no longer makes sense. In the past, he suggests things and symbols must sum of the underlying realities or provide gloss or commentary on them. Baudrillard argues that even in the real world are material experience of modes and mythology that emanate from autonomous culture setting. The terms he used to capture this strange dynamic are simulation and simulacrum. Modern ideas about the power of knowledge and culture that develop in contemporary society were prominently hinted in the words of Daniel Bell, written in the 1960 and early 1970. While Bell is clearly modernism in both sensibility and theoretical style, his work such as The Coming of Post-Industrial Society and The Culture Contradiction of Capitalism document a decisive shift from industrial modernity to information-driven modernity. In this work, Bell saw that in the second half of the 20th century, the continued growth of capitalism depended on information and knowledge technologies created by research centers such as universities and high-tech companies. At the same time, citizens are transformed into consumer with a growing demand for goods and entertainment. Bell point out that a contradiction exists between the hedonistic demands driven by culture for consumer goods and the needs of the state and the economy. Postmodern theorizing, the first steps were made by French theorists during the 1980. The Anglophone nation began to catch up. Perhaps the most significant development of the era was the birth of new Marxist culture commentary, one strongly hostile to the aesthetic code of postmodernism. What to show how the power of capitalism is at the heart of contemporary cultural shift, and the last three care to document the relationship between in this shift and the possibility of human emancipation. Of the earliest and most influential account of postmodernism is an article published in 1984 in the New Leaf Review by the leading literary critic Friedrich Jameson. This essay provides an important starting point for all those interested in postmodern aesthetic and their connected to capitalism development. James says postmodernism and capitalism are so closely related that every position on postmodernism in culture is one and the same time. Jameson's essay features an important discussion about the Bonaventure Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. This theme is further illustrated in his discussion of art. Jameson compared Van Gogh's peasant clothes to Andy Warhol's screen print. The previous image shows a pair of dirty wooden clothes. According to Jameson, we can attribute this to a coherence and profound hermeneutic interpretation. They can be read as symbol of the difficulty of aesthetic farmer life. Warhol image is a screen print showing a wide variant of high heels. Such a postmodern work rejects stable interpretation. This might be read as a celebration of consumerism or as criticism. Perhaps it reveals the artist's own tendencies for fetishism, or maybe it's an ironic parody for them. In explanation the rise of artistic postmodernism, James used a new marxism framework. He suggests that we have entered into a phase of late capitalism marked by the relentless circulation of seed and symbol and global flow of information. To combat postmodernism, he suggests that we understand its new spatiologies and develop critical tools for reading postmodern cultural artifacts. Implicated in the concept of postmodernism is the idea that it somehow comes after modernism. Yet when we look closely at various domains, we see that artistic modernism reached a high water mark at divergence point. One, in literature, we think of the work of writers like T.C. Eliot, James Joyce, and Virginia Woolf, and work that reached a peak of innovation in the 1920 and 1930. Two, in architecture, as we have seen, the focus is on the international style, which arose in the 1920s and continued strongly until the 1970s. And lastly, in music, the paradigm of modernity is associated with the Vienna School. This arose around Schoenberg in the early 90s, but was already being called by the postmodern work of John Cage and others in the 1940. Globalization can be thought of as a process involving three key dimensions. There are as follows. One, economic globalization is associated with the rise of world financial markets and free trade zones and global exchange of goods and services, and the rapid growth of transnational companies. Two, political globalization is about the way nation states are replaced by international organizations and the rise of global politics. And lastly, cultural globalization is about the flow of information, signs, and symbols around the world and reaction to the flow.